Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So thank you to KIENDA for sponsoring me with a copy of Delicious to review, but I was already keen to try this one because Pencil First games have really come into their own. There's a bunch of their catalogue I've still not played. I mean, Skulk Hollow, 100 Tory, Heroes Welcome, Whatnot Cabinet. But I've got a few of their games downstairs in a Calyx Square. Sunset Over Water, lovely pleasant game. I've got Herbaceous, the first one in this kind of foodie nature series, which was, very simple card game for non-gamers. Decent enough, 7 out of 10. It's not for me, I'm not the target market per se, but I can bring it out and teach anybody it in 5 seconds, and it's a nice pleasant game, it works, it does what it says on the backs. Floriferous that came after it was in my top 100, in my top 50 games. It was a brilliant filler, love it, it's such a cool, tense but simple game, and that was all about flowers. This one is now fruit and veg, done by the same designers, Steve Finn and Eduardo Baraf, but I believe the artist is Clementine Campardo. Hopefully I don't have to put subtitles to correct myself on that. And this is, I think, the same artist who did Floriferous, and that was one of the most beautiful games I've played. And, well, this is no different. Everything here is beautiful as well. But this is a simple kind of semi-flip and right. It's a little bit of a flip and right. Essentially what you're doing is you're trying to fill up planters on your pad here. There's several for vegetables, there's one for fruit, there's different restrictions as to what can go, like they must be the same or different or in pairs. Fruit like to be in columns and rows, and you'll score for having lots of the same fruit in rows and columns. So it's abstracted to a sense, but it's one of those deals where you start off by putting the vegetables and fruit into places and you're like, my choices, oh no, not as much choice as I had when I started. Oh no, I need a carrot, where's a carrot? I can't get it in. It's very much that style of game. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Harvest Dice actually, the roll and write which has you sketching the vegetable patches. When you start off, you've got all the options in the world, but then when you get nearer to the end, a little bit more restriction, a little bit less choice. And I love games that have a good progression arc like that, where you feel like, you started off with a bit of liberal freedom, but then by the end it's like, what do I do now? Always like that. It's always quite good fun. But essentially, it's very straightforward. You're basically just flipping over 2 cards of these varied vegetables and placing fruit and tool tokens on them. Essentially, what happens is that you have to choose each round how many of the cards you're going to use, whether it's just the one at the top, one at the bottom, both but in reverse, one in reverse, both anywhere. And the tokens let you do kind of wild things, like your planters have got tools in various places that can act as like another way to draw something, but then you've also got the fruit, which you want to put in your fruit planter, and you're obviously trying to get different fruits. And there's quite a few amount. I mean, you literally have 6 different vegetables and 5 different fruit that you can draw on this thing. And yes, you can be artistic and draw them all, or you can use the letters on the pad. Trust me, I use the letters. If you ever played Telestrations with me, I can't draw for toffee. I really cannot draw. So yeah, I ain't drawing fruit and veg. I'm writing the letters, so sue me. But the idea is that you are deciding what you want to do with the tokens on the cards and all the cards themselves, and then they go away, and then you flip a couple more. So, now we got carrot and onion in this one. All right, done that round. Right, now we got onion, mushroom. Okay, fine. Next one, we've got broccoli and lettuce. I want something else other than that if you're just going to serve me that on the plate, but still. And you just essentially go through most of the deck. A few cards are removed at the start of the game, so you don't have perfect information, but it's mainly just go through the deck and the tokens and see who's got most points by the time you get to the end based on various criteria. Spoiler alert, it doesn't quite beat Floriferous. I don't think it's at that level, but this is kind of in the middle out of those 3, Herbaceous, Delicious, and Floriferous. Try saying those fast when you're drunk.
Drinks?
The usual quirks that you get in these games are here. I mean, the honey pot, for example, when you do all your planters, you get the honey pot bonus. It's just like the herb biscuit from previous ones. There's always something like that in these games, which is just a nice little pick-me-up. But then you've also got, like really nice tokens. You've got pencils. You've got an insert, which is semi-useful. I mean, once you've sleeved the cards, you might just chuck the insert and just put everything in the box. It's probably easier to do it that way. But you got a decent amount of pads on here, and you've got a decent amount of pads on here, because there's wild things that you can put on here as well as your choices. More on that in a minute. And you know, the cards, you'll probably want to sleeve these, even though you're not doing too much with them, because the card stock is not bad, but it's not perfect. But man, this artwork. Oh my word. I love the Sunset, Herbaceous, Floriferous, and this. I could just have all the cards from these on my wall and just stare at it all day. They look so good, and maybe I'm a sucker for nature art. I think nature, waterfalls, and things like that, especially water-related stuff, I just love. I love that kind of scenery, but this sort of stuff, I mean, it's just a sprig of broccoli. And yet, I want to eat it right now. And I usually only want broccoli once it's cooked or in a stir fry. But right now, I would happily just eat this card because the broccoli looks so scrumptious from how nice it looks on the card.
Salted pork.
The rules themselves, not too difficult. The first time I played this, I learned straight from the rulebook. Now, we did trip up on a few things. We played the game correctly, but there are a few things in here that are a little bit hard to kind of get your head around. And unfortunately, there is no reference aid in here to give to an individual player, so if they're asking a question, you have to come back to the rulebook to find out. There's not enough intuitive iconography on the pads themselves in order to remind you how things work, particularly when it comes to these wild and bonus spots. You can cross these off and do various effects and get other scoring bonuses, but it's not as always easy to tell what they do by just crossing them off. And then the tool tokens and the fruit tokens, you know, when you've got a fruit, it's like, right, that fruit can go in that planter anywhere, but it's got to be that fruit and by restrictions. But then you've got the tools, and it's like, okay, what do I do with the tools? So that's effectively a wild, well, no, not quite, because yes, it can be any fruit or veg, but if it's a fruit, it goes in that planter. If it's a vegetable, then yes, it can go anywhere, but you must put it where there's a tool symbol, and you must still respect top to bottom. It's like, right, there's a few little exceptions to the rule, or a few variants on how each token and each card works, that it does trip people up, and it does make the teach for the first game a little bit fiddly if you're not familiar with it. Bear in mind, the first time I learned it, it was straight from the rulebook, and I think if you do learn it straight from the rulebook, you are going to probably need that first game to get to grips with it. It is technically a simultaneous game. You flip over the cards and you do everything at the same time, but trust me, you're going to want 3 rounds where you do everything in turn order just to showcase how stuff works and interacts before you trust everybody to do it correctly when you do simultaneous. But if you're familiar with the game, simultaneous all the way through and you'll be good. But yeah, I would say that this is definitely a step up from Floriferous in terms of its complexity, or maybe it's just because of the way the rules are done, but I thought Floriferous was an easier game than this one to grok and to play. I think this one's definitely, the more thinky out of the 3 of them. Herbaceous is basically a kid's game, frankly, in terms of its complexity. It is so simple. Floriferous is not complicated at all, but there's some tense decision making, and that's why it's one of my favourite fillers. It's got some good thinkiness, but it's not overly complex. This one is a little bit more complex, but it is still a light game. It is still a filler, well, filler 30 to 60 minutes kind of at the end of the day. It says 20 minutes on the box. You'll be lucky. You'll be lucky to get this done in 20 minutes. It is not happening. Maybe if you play the solo, and even then, 20 minutes is pushing it. But, you know, 30 to 60 minutes is kind of what you're looking at for this game, which is still relatively short. I don't think I would consider this to be a filler game per se. I think it's not going to hit 30 minutes often enough to be considered a filler, particularly if you're teaching new players and you've got to do things in turn order to begin with. But it's not far off. It's a light game at the end of the day. It's just that the ones that have come before it are just going to be a little bit more on the speedy side. Now, we've seen this type of game before with the whole idea of like, right, okay, so I need to put all peppers on this row, I need to have pairs of carrot, pair of broccoli, these have all got to be different, right? So there's a pepper, there's a broccoli, there's a lettuce, there's an onion, there's a, you know, and you get points for various completion of rows and columns. We've seen this before. This is not particularly original, but it's fairly neat and it's done well here, and there's a lot of different paths that you can take. I mean, there's bonuses for finishing a particular planter first. There's points to be scored for rows and columns of contiguous groups of fruit in this planter, but then there's also varying levels of points for the different rows and columns you do in these planters. So you may decide, well, you know, am I going to rush for this honey pot bonus? Am I going to try and finish certain planters first? Am I just going to say, you know what, I'm not too fussed about veg, am I just going to go for fruit? Fair enough. Are you actually going to use the bonus scoring opportunities on here where you put a particular fruit and veg in and then you score based on whether you've got them in various containers or how many you've got in the fruit container? I've actually found out, much to my delight, that you don't have to do these two in order to do well. First game we played, and I think several others after that had a similar deal, where, well, I'll use my first game as an example. I got 44 points as a first time. I didn't get any of those bonuses. None. 44. And somebody else I knew didn't get any, used the bonuses. I think they used both and still scored less than me. I think the person who won the game did use them both, or at least used one of them, but only finished 4 points above me. So there was only a 4-point difference, you know, a 10% score rating for someone who utilized those compared to me who didn't use any of them. So there is a way to win by just being very efficient with these or focusing on this aspect without having to feel that you must cross out these two. Because, I mean, if you had to put a fruit and a vegetable in those two spots, they could have gone somewhere else on your board. So it does balance out quite nicely.
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
But the real meat,
Really?
I love about this game is not so much this whole aspect of putting stuff in columns and that. We've seen that before, as we said. What I love, though, is the plant choice aspect. The mechanic is that you have only so many rounds in the game. You have, I believe, what was it, 4, 7, 10, 12. 12 rounds, and there's 4 different ways you can pick the cards. You can either pick one on its own, one in reverse order, bearing in mind they're in the top to bottom thing. You can have both cards as they are, or both cards anywhere you want them. And there's different amount of times that you can pick each choice, and each round you're basically going, right, okay, so broccoli and lettuce with a watering can and a strawberry on it. Okay, fine. So, hang on a minute. I could really use that broccoli, but I want it down there, so maybe I should have that in reverse, but then do I need the lettuce? Not desperately. I mean, it would be nice. I could cross off 2 as my choice, but now, you know what? We'll ignore the lettuce, we'll ignore the strawberry. I need the watering can and the broccoli, and I need it in the south planter. So we're going to pick one in reverse. But you've only got a limited amount of times you can pick each one. So again, the choices get more limited as you go through the game, and it makes for some very tough choices, because you'll look at a pair of cards and you're like, oh, that would be nice if I could use both, but if I do that, I'm going to utilize my last chance to use that kind of plant choice. And it's just a really cool, simple mechanism that gives you a decent amount of turn angst. Really is my favorite. Now, there is a bit of luck of draw-the aspect. I mean, it is a card game at the end of the day. It's a filler. There is some luck involved. You know, that you remove so many cards at the start of the game, you might have just removed a bunch of veg that you were hoping that you were going to get lots of, and it's like, oh, I've got a bunch of lettuces, I just need one more and then I can get the bonus with it. Oh, no more lettuces turned up. But whatever, it's a light game, these things happen, and you know, it's 6 cards, you don't have perfect information, that's just the way it is. And you may get times where you're looking for certain combinations and they all come out at once rather than spaced out, which you would prefer, but then you do have the opportunity to use every card. It's just, did you waste those choices before? It's not too bad. There's an element of luck, but it's a light card game. I think we can give it a little bit of leeway on that. There is a quick little solo mode in this. I'm not going to explain too much about it, but you can play it solo in one of 2 manners. You can either just literally play the game as you were and just see what points you get, which, granted, is not the most interesting victory condition, but hey, if you just want a quick filler to tie you up for 30 minutes on a train or something, this is a pretty good way to do it, honestly. Or you can have the crow, the pesky guest returns, which is essentially kind of similar to the normal solo game, except you have the crow occasionally flying around your different planters, and as it goes on a planter, it stops you sketching on it. So it's, as I say, a pesky guest. It doesn't have its own planters, obviously, but it's just basically like, oh, I'm having a nice time with my veg here, and I'm right, get off, you stupid crow. And it's just that little bit of flavour, and it kind of makes thematic sense in a sense. I'm sure farmers who do this sort of thing probably have all the time, like, yeah, if only I didn't have crows constantly going after my food, you know. I don't know, is that a thing? Let me know if you're a farmer. But it's just very simple solo mode. You've got 2 ways to play it. It's just basically a couple of pages of simple rules, very straightforward, and it adds more variety to the game, which already has a decent amount of variety in how you can play it and how you can approach it. So 2 solo modes, 1 multiplayer mode, pretty good for this low price that you're paying for. I mean, this is only somewhere, I think, in the early 20s, I believe. I think like it's probably like 25 max. I think it's closer to 20 actually. I mean, I've seen Peripherals go for like 17, 18, which is a bargain. If this is going for around 20 bucks, for the artwork and components in this, you're getting a bargain. So Delicious is another great game that's come out for them, honestly. It It really is very enjoyable. I don't know what it is. Maybe I just really need to play the rest of their catalogue. I don't know, because some of these games I've heard about don't get as much buzz. But these ones, these nature ones, herbaceous and floriferous and delicious, not so much Sunset Over Water, it's a bit more of a sleeper. But, you know, these three have just been solid, you know, and they go for different markets. I mean, this one is kind of a bit more of a gamery type game, so I can play this with, you know, that crowd. Herbaceous, I can play with someone who's never seen a board game in their life. And floriferous, I can play kind of in the middle or with both. But this one, oh, I'm on an R-ing. It's definitely at least an 8. This is definitely at least a great game, but, oh, 8 or 9, I can't decide. 8 or 9, what do I do?
3 days later.
Oh, my head hurts. Fizzkick, what do you think? What score should I give it? Oh, I don't know. Fizzkick, tell me. Oi. Oh, I think I have made a little bit of a decision here. So, right. The blemishes in this are more than in Floriferous, for example. In Floriferous, I gave a 9 out of 10. This one definitely has like a lot of great stuff going for it. It's well produced, looks great, well priced. It's another great filler. But it's definitely not as easy to pick up rules-wise as the other ones are. Even Floriferous, you know, for the meat it has, is a very, very easy game to explain. This one just has a few bits and bobs that do trip people up, and the lack of a reference aid doesn't help with that. I would have liked to have seen something like just on a card for players to remind them how the plant choices work and how these wild things work. You know, so it does make it a little bit more of a fiddly first teach. The variety in the box is still great though, the artwork is brilliant, but then also at the end of the day, it's not exactly a filler length unless you're playing a solo or maybe 2 players. I think with 3 or 4 you are kind of overstepping that filler mark, and as cool as this is, it's not the newest thing we've seen. I mean, yes, I do love this plant choice thing and the wild stuff that you can do, but putting stuff into various boxes and different combinations is not the most original idea ever, but like I say, it is still a good one and it still works well. I'm giving this a super strong 8 out of 10. This is still a great game. Still one that is going to sit in the collection alongside all those Calyx ones, all the other ones in the Calyx down there. I still think that this line of games from Pencil First are, you know, excellent fillers and light games to have in your collection, particularly if you're just into nice, short, light stuff. This makes me want to try out the rest of their stuff. Whatnot, 100 Tory, you know, Skulk Hollow, all of these games, you know, I've not really played from their catalogue. I now want to try them all now. You know, will they be as good as these, like, you know, nature ones? I don't know. Maybe it's just this particular series because of their nature motifs and aesthetics. Maybe they're just kind of singing to me in that respect. But you got to admit, for the price, for the stuff you're getting, it is still a really, really great game to have. It just has a few more nitpicks that I gotta sort of give, you know, tough love for compared to Slave Floriferous, which is definitely a Seal of Distinction level game, but this is still a seal of endorsement and I still highly, highly recommend it. So that's it for me. If you like what you see, please remember you can thumb this video up on YouTube, you can thumb it up on Board Game Geek, that would be great, but also consider the Patreon if you want me to get more copies of games that you'd like to see reviewed, but mainly get your comments down below. If you got a favourite filler, or actually, let's talk about Pencil First games. The whole catalogue of Pencil First games. Let me know your favourites, even if they're ones that I haven't mentioned in this video. You know, is it this particular line? Do you like Herbaceous, Floriferous, or this one more, or Sunset Over Water? You know, am I really missing out on Tory and Skulk Hollow and Whatnot Cabinet? You know, let me know your thoughts. Let's talk Pencil First. You know, it's great to see these little light games coming out of nowhere in a sense and just being good, fun games. Not every game needs to be a 3-hour monstrosity. As much as I love Ark Nova and Spirit Island and stuff like that, there are times where, you know, I've had a long day at work, I'm a little bit stressed, I just want to ease myself into something nice, light and pleasant, and I want to play some nice, light, easy games. And so far, Delicious, Herbaceous, Floriferous, they really do a good job of putting me in that state of mind that I want to be after a long, stressful day. So, you know, kudos, credit where it's due. They're definitely worth it. So until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including the recent review I did for the hitbox game from Days of Wonder, Heat, Pedal to the Metal, but also check out the review I did for Wayfarers of the South Tigris if you want something a little bit more heavy and a bit more thinky. So until next time, take care, and remember, regardless of whether your favourite veg is lettuce or broccoli, it's still only a game. Bye for now.
Salted pork.
Really?